My name is Cathy, and I am 27 years old. I never thought I'd be the type of person to secretly record family conversations, but here I am at 27, sitting in my one-bedroom apartment in Chicago, listening to audio files of my mother trying to manipulate me out of the home I paid for. If you told me 5 years ago I'd be doing this, I would have laughed. I would have said my family wasn't perfect, but we weren't that kind of family. I was wrong. I'm the oldest of three. My sister Emily is 20 in college, and my youngest brother Nathan is 18, barely starting freshman year. Our parents, David and Patricia, divorced when I was 15. It wasn't the kind of divorce where people quietly drift apart and stay polite for the kids. It was messy, public, the kind where your mother becomes a different person afterward, tighter, sharper, constantly scanning for control because she feels like she lost it. Dad remarried and moved to Seattle. Mom stayed in suburban Illinois with us and carried the divorce like a wound that never healed properly. She never recovered financially or emotionally, and she turned that loss into something else, a story where she was the only stable force, and everyone else owed her loyalty for surviving. I learned young that the only way to keep the peace was to be useful. I started working at 14. Scholarships, loans, whatever I could stack to avoid being dependent on anyone. I paid for my own college, graduated, landed a decent job as a software developer, and 2 years ago, I did the thing my family always treated like a fantasy. I bought my own place. It's small, 650 square feet, but it has exposed brick, hardwood floors, and the kind of quiet you can only appreciate after growing up in a house where your feelings were always interrupted. Most importantly, it's mine. Emily's life went differently. Not because she's incapable, but because Mom decided she shouldn't have to struggle. Emily is Mom's golden child. She studies marketing, lives in a cramped studio that Mom helps pay for, and complains constantly about how tiny it is, how the neighborhood feels unsafe, how she can't focus. Mom repeats those complaints to me like they're my responsibility to solve. It's just not fair, she'd say. Emily shouldn't have to live like that. 6 months ago, Emily started spending more time at my place. At first, it was harmless. It's quieter here, she said. I can actually study. I didn't mind. I like my sister when she's not echoing Mom's voice. She'd come over with a laptop, sit at my kitchen counter, eat my cereal, and leave by 9. Then she started bringing friends. Then she stayed overnight. Then she started keeping clothes in my closet like it was normal. Before I knew it, she was at my apartment 4 nights a week. My utilities doubled. My fridge was always empty. My shampoo disappeared faster than it should have. My home started feeling like a shared space I hadn't agreed to share. I tried to handle it gently because I didn't want to become the villain in Mom's story. One night, while Emily was scrolling on my couch like she lived here, I said, "Hey, if you're going to be here this much, can you contribute to utilities?" I kept my voice calm, almost too calm. I watched her face change immediately, like I'd insulted her. She didn't argue. She didn't negotiate. She just got quiet. The next day, Mom called. "Family helps family," she said, like it was a scripture she could quote to end conversations. "Your sister is struggling in that terrible apartment. You have all this space to yourself. It's selfish not to share." Mom, I worked hard for this," I said. "I still have student loans. Emily has her own place that you help pay for." "And it's tiny," Mom snapped. "And you know the neighborhood isn't safe. How can you let your sister live like that when you have such a nice place?" That word "let" was the first knife. Like Emily was my responsibility. Like Mom was talking about a pet I'd abandoned. Those conversations became weekly, then twice a week, then every time Emily complained about anything, my phone lit up with Mom's name and the same tired script. "Cathy, don't be selfish. Cathy, don't be cruel. Cathy, your sister needs you." It was always framed like I was withholding something I didn't earn. Like my apartment was family property, not a home I bought with my own money. Then Mom started showing up, unannounced, always with Emily beside her like an assistant. They'd walk through my apartment, making comments out loud like they were shopping. This bookshelf would be perfect for Emily's textbooks. She could put her desk right here. This closet has so much space. The first time it happened, I laughed awkwardly because I didn't know what else to do. The second time, I felt my chest tighten. The third time, I realized it wasn't a joke. 3 months ago, Mom finally said the part she'd been building toward. She called me on a Tuesday night while I was debugging code and already stressed. "I've been thinking," she said. "The most logical solution is for you and Emily to switch apartments." I almost dropped my phone. You want me to give up the apartment I bought and move into Emily's rental studio? Not give up, she said quickly, voice sweetening. Trade. It's temporary, just until Emily graduates. Mom, I said slowly, I own my apartment. Emily rents hers. That's not how this works. Don't be difficult, she snapped. We can work out details. Emily can pay you rent. The rent she pays wouldn't cover half my mortgage. Well, we'll figure it out, she said, impatient now. The important thing is taking care of your sister. That was my breaking point. Not because I suddenly stopped loving my family, but because I finally saw the pattern clearly. Mom wasn't asking. She was assigning. She was deciding my home belonged to Emily because she wanted it to, and she assumed I'd cave the way I always had. Instead of arguing, I did something I'd never done before. I started documenting everything. Once I started documenting, I realized how much of my life had been built around pretending I didn't need to protect myself from my own mother. It began with simple things. Screenshots of her texts, the ones that always started sweet and ended sharp. Cathy, your sister needs you. Cathy, don't be selfish. Cathy, why are you doing this to the family? I saved every one. Then I started recording calls. Not with dramatic speeches, not with threats, just quietly pressing record the moment I saw her name on the screen. The first time I listened back, my stomach turned. Hearing her voice with distance, without the emotional fog of being her daughter, made her manipulation sound exactly like what it was. A strategy. Mom didn't know I was recording. Emily didn't either. They kept talking like they always had, comfortable in the assumption that they controlled the narrative. Patricia escalated quickly after the switch idea didn't work the first time. She started showing up more often, always unannounced, always with Emily like reinforcement. They'd stand in my entryway and act like they were doing me a favor by being there. My mom would look around with that same measuring gaze as if my apartment was an open house. You could save money in a smaller place, she'd say, walking past my couch without asking. Think about it. Emily needs this more than you do. The first time she said the word needs, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Emily didn't need my home. She wanted it. And my mom wanted to be the one who delivered it to her, like a gift that proved her power. When I told them no again, Mom shifted tactics. She started calling extended family. My aunt texted me one night saying she heard Emily was struggling and I was refusing to help. My cousin messaged, half joking, "You really keeping that whole place to yourself like a villain." I realized Mom wasn't just trying to pressure me directly. She was building a chorus. She was surrounding me with opinions until I felt outnumbered. That's when I installed the security camera. I told myself it was for general safety. Chicago, apartment building, normal precautions. But the truth was simpler. Mom had always had a way of finding access to things that weren't hers, and I didn't trust that she wouldn't try it with my home. 2 days after I installed it, the camera gave me my first real confirmation that my instincts weren't paranoid. At 2:13 p.m., while I was at work, I got a notification on my phone. Motion detected at front door. I opened the app and felt my chest tighten. Mom and Emily. Emily unlocked my door like it was nothing. They walked in laughing, carrying a tape measure. I watched from my desk as they moved through my apartment like they owned it. Mom stood in the living room and pointed. Emily walked into my bedroom and opened my closet. They measured the wall by the window. They took photos. Emily sat on my bed and said, loud and clear, "This will be perfect for when Brandon stays over." Brandon. The boyfriend my mom pretended didn't exist because it didn't fit her narrative. Brandon, 25, unemployed, and apparently already planning to move into my apartment with Emily like it was the natural next step. I saved the clip immediately. My hands were shaking, but my mind was cold. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was trespass. This was planning. This was entitlement playing dress up as family. That evening, I didn't confront them. Not yet. I kept recording. I kept collecting. And the deeper I went, the uglier it got. Mom called me selfish 43 times in 1 month. I counted. Not because I'm petty, but because hearing a word that many times rewires something in your brain. She threatened to cut me out of the will 12 times. Joke's on her. There was never going to be anything for me. She accused me of not loving my family 28 times. She compared me to my absent father 18 times, always in the same tone, like being like him was the worst insult she could throw. And then she did something even worse. She started spreading a rumor that I must be gay because I wouldn't take care of Emily, which in her mind meant giving Emily my home. She told my aunt that if I had a normal life, I wouldn't be so attached to an apartment. Emily didn't know she was saying that. I know because when I recorded the call where Mom said it, Emily's voice wasn't in the room. Just Mom, tossing cruelty into the air like it was harmless. By the time Mom announced she was coming over to finalize the apartment situation, I had a full folder organized on my laptop, audio files labeled by date and topic, screenshots arranged chronologically, video clips of unauthorized entry. I even transcribed the worst parts so I wouldn't have to replay them again and again to prove what I already knew. I backed everything up 3 times: cloud storage, external drive, a USB I kept at work. Because I wasn't just dealing with a manipulative parent anymore. I was dealing with someone who believed she owned me. And the thing about people like that is they don't stop until they hit a wall. The family meeting was scheduled for the next day at 2 p.m. Mom called it a discussion. I knew it was a takeover attempt. The morning of the family meeting felt strange, like the air in my apartment had thickened overnight. I woke up early, not because I was anxious, but because my body had already decided something was ending today. I cleaned the kitchen, even though it was already clean. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I walked from room to room, checking that the security camera angle was right, that the laptop cables were connected, that my phone was fully charged, and recording would be one tap away, and At 11:47, Mom texted, "On our way, let's be reasonable today." I almost laughed. At 2 o'clock exactly, there was a knock. Not tentative, not polite, the knock of someone who assumes they belong wherever they are standing. I opened the door. Mom walked in first, chin lifted, purse on her arm like a badge of authority. Emily followed, already smiling, already confident. They sat on my couch without asking, legs crossed, surveying the room like they were waiting for a realtor to begin the showing. "Michael," Mom began, then corrected herself quickly. "Cathy," like my name had slipped out wrong on purpose. "We need to discuss the timeline for the apartment switch. Emily's lease is up in 2 months, so this really is the perfect—" "Stop," I said. The word landed heavier than I expected. Mom blinked. Emily's smile faltered. "I've told you repeatedly that I'm not switching apartments," I continued, keeping my voice even. "This is my home. I bought it. This conversation is over." Mom's face flushed instantly. "Cathy Patricia Henderson, you will not speak to me that way. I am your mother, and I'm telling you what's best for this family." "No," I said. "You're telling me what's best for Emily, and I'm done pretending those are the same thing." Emily shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us. Before Mom could launch into another speech, I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The first audio file played. Mom's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "You're being incredibly selfish. What kind of sister lets her sibling struggle while she lives like a queen? I'm ashamed of you." The color drained from her face. Emily's mouth opened slightly. "What is that?" "That's you," I said, looking at Mom. 3 weeks ago. Recorded in my living room." "Yeah, you recorded me without my permission," Mom snapped, standing halfway up. "That's illegal." "I live here," I replied calmly. "I recorded conversations in my own home for my own protection. I've already checked with a lawyer. I can't use these in court, but I can absolutely use them to defend myself." I didn't pause. I played the next clip. Mom telling my aunt that I was probably gay, and that's why I was being so weird about an apartment. Emily gasped, "Mom!" Mom's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then I switched to video. The security footage filled the screen. Mom and Emily unlocking my door, walking in, measuring walls, opening closets, Emily sitting on my bed. Emily's own voice echoed through the room. "This will be perfect for when Brandon stays over." Emily's face went red. "You went through my messages." "No," I said. "You said it out loud in my bedroom while trespassing." Mom dropped back onto the couch, hands shaking now. "You wouldn't dare try me." I pulled out my phone. "I have a Facebook post drafted," I said quietly. "Audio of you calling me a disappointment. Video of you breaking into my apartment. Screenshots of texts where you threaten to disown me if I don't give Emily my home. Our entire extended family follows me. Your church friends follow me. Your co-workers follow me." Emily finally spoke, her voice small for the first time. "Cathy, you don't have to do this." "Oh, but I do," I replied, "because this doesn't stop unless it costs you something." I turned to Emily. "And you're not innocent here. I have recordings of you telling Mom I must be hiding money. I have you suggesting she guilt me using Dad leaving. I have you planning to move your boyfriend in here." "How did you get those?" she whispered. "Because you had those conversations in my apartment," I said. "On my Wi-Fi, on phones I help pay for." The room went dead silent. Mom finally whispered, "What do you want?" "Simple," I said. "This stops. No more asking about my apartment, no more guilt trips, no more lies to the family, no more unauthorized entries. Emily visits only when invited, no more than once a week, and you both apologize, genuinely." "And if we don't?" Emily asked. I held up my phone, and then everyone sees everything, including the recording where Mom admits to claiming Emily as a dependent on her taxes when she isn't, which I'm sure the IRS would love. Mom's face went green. Silence stretched until it felt like time itself was waiting. Finally, Mom spoke, barely audible. I'm sorry for trying to force you out of your apartment, for the guilt trips, for lying to the family. I looked at Emily. She was crying now, but not theatrically. I'm sorry too. I just hate my apartment. And Mom says things and I let her. You're 20, I said gently but firmly. It's time to stop letting her fight your battles. They left 20 minutes later, both in tears. The door closed, and for the first time in months, my apartment was quiet. Not tense, not waiting. Quiet. The quiet didn't last. It never does with my mother. For the first 3 days after the confrontation, there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I slept through the night for the first time in months. I worked without flinching every time my phone lit up. I even forgot to check the security camera once, which felt like a milestone. Then Nathan called. What did you do to Mom? He asked, not accusatory, just confused. She's been locked in her room crying. Emily won't talk to anyone. And Mom said something about you being dangerous now. That word landed hard. Dangerous. Like setting boundaries had turned me into a threat. Nathan, I said carefully, did Mom tell you what she's been trying to do? Something about helping Emily with housing, he replied. She made it sound like a misunderstanding. I sent him 3 audio files, not the worst ones, just enough. There was a long pause on the line after he listened. Holy shit, Cathy, he finally said. She's been doing this for months. That's not helping Emily. That's trying to steal your home. Yeah, I said, it is. I'm really sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know. That was the first crack in the story Mom had been telling. By Wednesday, the extended family got involved. Mom reached out to Aunt Linda, the family mediator, with a carefully edited version of events. Aunt Linda called me that night, her voice tight with concern. Cathy, your mother says you're threatening to humiliate her publicly over a misunderstanding. I laughed. Actually laughed. Did she mention the recordings, I asked? Or the unauthorized entry? Or the tax fraud? Silence. She didn't mention those parts, did she? Aunt Linda exhaled. No. Would you like to hear some of it? I asked. I played one clip, just one. Mom's voice, venomous and dismissive. Oh my God, Aunt Linda whispered. She said that about you? There's more, I said, but I think you get the picture. Within hours, the family group chat exploded. Aunt Linda confronted Mom. Mom admitted to exaggerating. Not lying. Exaggerating. The difference mattered to her. Then Brandon showed up. Emily's boyfriend. 25, unemployed, trying very hard to look intimidating in my hallway. You need to apologize to Emily, he said, puffing his chest. She's been crying all week because of you. Brandon, I said calmly. The guy who planned to move into my apartment once Emily forced me out? His face went red. I have that conversation recorded too, I added. The one where you called me a pushover and said Mom would break me eventually. I played it. He didn't say another word, just turned and left. Emily called an hour later, furious. Not embarrassed. Furious that I'd humiliated Brandon. I reminded her that he came to my apartment to intimidate me and that she should be grateful I didn't call the police. That weekend, Dad called. For the first time in years. Cathy, he said, uncertain. Your mother says you're threatening her. When's the last time you talked to any of us? I asked. He didn't answer. I sent him the entire evidence folder. Everything. Every recording, every screenshot, every video. 2 hours later, he called back, voice shaking. This is abuse. Yes, I said, it is. I should have protected you kids, he said quietly. You didn't, I replied. But I'm protecting myself now. By Sunday night, the family dynamic had shifted completely. The people who automatically sided with Mom went quiet. The ones who listened saw the truth. And then Emily showed up alone. No Mom, no script, just exhaustion. Can we talk? She asked softly. I let her in, phone recording in my pocket out of habit more than fear. I listened to the recordings, she said. All of them. I didn't realize how bad it was. How bad I was. She told me about Mom feeding her resentment for years, about being told I had advantages she didn't, about being encouraged to see me as competition instead of a sister. I chose to go along with it, she said, crying. I chose to lie. I chose to sneak in. I chose to guilt you. I'm not a kid anymore. It was the first time she'd taken responsibility without deflecting. I want to change, she said. I'm getting a job. I'm paying you back for utilities. And I told Mom if she doesn't stop, I'll cut contact too. She hugged me before leaving. A real hug. The first one in years that didn't feel performative. That night, Mom emailed me. A long, spiraling message full of blame, self-pity, and guilt. I didn't respond. Because for the first time, I understood something clearly. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the boundary. 3 weeks of silence passed, and for once, it didn't feel like the calm before a storm. It felt like something heavy had finally been set down. I worked, slept, cooked, and lived inside my apartment without bracing for impact. No surprise visits, no late-night calls, no just checking in texts that were really probes. The quiet had shape to it. Boundaries do that. They turn chaos into something measurable. Then Thanksgiving showed up on the calendar like a dare. Mom broke the silence with a group text, carefully phrased and outwardly polite. I'm hosting Thanksgiving as always. I hope everyone can make it despite the recent family difficulties. The word difficulties did a lot of work there. It pretended this was a scheduling hiccup, not months of manipulation and trespass. My phone lit up immediately with private messages from relatives asking if I was going. I didn't answer at first. I wanted to see who would speak without prompting. Emily did. I won't be attending unless Cathy is welcome and treated with respect. She added, I'm bringing my boyfriend. No apology attached, no explanation, just a line drawn in public. Nathan followed. Same, if Cathy isn't welcome, I'm out. The chat erupted. Aunts tried to mediate. Cousins chose sides. Mom went quiet for exactly 12 minutes before calling me. When I answered, her voice was different. Not syrupy, not sharp, thin. I don't want to lose my children, she said. Then stop trying to control us, I replied. I don't know how, she admitted. The admission landed harder than any accusation. Control had been her language for so long that without it, she sounded lost. I told her the truth. Therapy. Real therapy. Not the church counselor who told her obedience was love. Someone trained to call patterns what they were. I gave her a referral from my cousin Jennifer, who'd been guiding me quietly through this. Mom didn't argue. She asked for the number. She didn't ask for praise. Thanksgiving ended up small. Not at Mom's house. At Nathan's cramped dorm apartment, because no one wanted a throne or a spotlight. Chinese takeout replaced turkey. We sat on mismatched chairs and ate from cartons. Mom arrived nervous, subdued, holding a folded letter. She asked if she could read it. We said yes. The apology was specific, painfully so. She named behaviors, the guilt trips, the lies, the unauthorized entries. She apologized to me first, then to Emily and Nathan. No, if you felt hurt. No, I was just trying to help. Just ownership. I didn't cry. I listened. Accountability sounds different than regret. December became the real test. Old habits don't vanish because someone read a letter once. Mom called about Christmas plans and started to slip. Since you have the biggest apartment, I thought... She stopped herself mid-sentence. Sorry, would you be willing to host? If not, we can do it at my place. The correction mattered more than the question. I hosted Christmas with rules stated clearly and calmly. No overnight stays, no snooping, no commentary about my lifestyle or my space, no triangulating conversations. Mom followed every rule. When Emily complained about her studio, Mom surprised us both. Emily, that's your responsibility to figure out, she said. Your sister's home is hers. Emily and I exchanged a look that said the same thing at once. Who is this woman? January brought more changes. Mom kept her therapy appointments without announcing them. She started dating a man from her group, asked permission before bringing him to anything. Emily got promoted at her part-time job and started saving. Nathan changed his major, despite Mom's initial discomfort, and when she started to object, she stopped herself. It's your life, she said. I trust you. Trust. The word sat carefully between us, earned slowly, fragile but present. I still had the recordings, encrypted, backed up, not as a weapon anymore, but as a reminder, a line I would not cross again. When people asked if I regretted recording my mother, I told them no. Sometimes the only way to stop manipulation is to expose it. Sometimes you need the nuclear option, just to get people to choose a different path. By the end of winter, my apartment felt like a sanctuary again, not a bunker. Family visited when invited. They respected my space. Conversations were careful, but they were real. Mom even complimented my decorating once without suggesting improvements. That felt bigger than it should have. Change didn't come from threats alone. It came from consequences and the willingness to sit with them. For the first time, love in my family wasn't being used as leverage. It was being offered with conditions that made sense. January stretched on, slow and cold, and for the first time in years, I didn't dread it. I kept waiting for the old patterns to resurface, for the phone calls that slid from concern into control, for the comments disguised as jokes, for the sudden urgency that always meant Mom wanted something. They didn't come. When they almost did, they stopped halfway, like a car braking before a red light. I stayed in therapy too, not because things were exploding, but because I finally had space to understand how much of myself I'd shaped around avoidance, how often I'd swallowed anger and called it maturity, how many times I'd mistaken peacekeeping for love. My therapist said something that stuck with me. Boundaries don't make relationships cold, they make them honest. I started to see how much dishonesty had been built into my family's version of closeness. Dad came to Chicago at the end of the month. We met for coffee near my place, and for the first time, it felt like two adults talking, not a parent trying to reclaim authority. He apologized again, without qualifiers, without pointing at Mom as the sole villain. He admitted that leaving had been easier than intervening, that absence had felt safer than confrontation. It didn't erase anything, but it mattered that he named it. We talked about work, about his life in Seattle, about things that had nothing to do with damage control. When we hugged goodbye, it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a beginning that would have to be rebuilt slowly. Emily surprised me most. She stopped asking for advice that was really permission in disguise. She didn't show up unannounced. When she visited, she asked first, and when I said no, she accepted it without drama. She paid me back for utilities without being reminded and sent a screenshot like it was normal. One night, she told me she and Brandon were in couples counseling because they didn't want to repeat our parents' patterns. Hearing that didn't make me proud. It made me hopeful. Mom slipped sometimes. She still did. She'd sigh heavily before correcting herself. She'd start a sentence with, "I just worry that," and then stop, breathe, and ask a question instead. Once, she caught herself mid-guilt trip and laughed softly, embarrassed. "Old habits," she said. "I'm working on it." And I believed her, not because I needed to, but because the work showed. I kept the recording app on my phone, but I didn't use it. Knowing it was there changed the power dynamic all by itself. My therapist called it a psychological boundary reinforcement. I called it peace of mind. When Mom's therapist reached out with her permission to thank me for forcing accountability, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, relief. Like the burden of being the only one who saw the truth had finally been shared. By early spring, the extended family had adjusted to our new normal. A few relatives still thought I'd been too harsh. Most didn't say it out loud anymore. Aunt Linda admitted she'd believed Mom's version for years because it was easier than questioning it. She apologized without asking me to comfort her about it. That mattered. I hosted dinner one Friday night and noticed something small but important. No one rearranged my furniture. No one commented on how much space I had. No one suggested how Emily might fit better here. We talked about work, classes, movies, normal things, the kind of conversation I'd thought was impossible in my family. Later, after everyone left, I stood in my living room and felt the quiet settle. Not the old quiet that meant tension was building. A clean quiet, the kind that lets you think. I realized then that saving my family hadn't come from threats alone. It came from choosing myself first and refusing to be moved after that. From letting consequences land and not rushing in to soften them, from believing that respect was the price of entry, not a reward for endurance. We weren't the family Mom once tried to engineer, the one where obedience equaled love and silence meant loyalty. We were something smaller, less dramatic, and infinitely more real. Independent adults choosing connection instead of being conscripted into it. And for the first time, that choice felt mutual. 3 months after everything broke open, I realized something quietly important. I wasn't bracing anymore. Not when my phone rang. Not when Mom's name popped up on the screen. Not when family plans came up in conversation. That constant low-level tension I'd lived with for years, the feeling that I needed to be ready to defend my choices at any moment, it was gone. Not erased, not forgotten, just no longer in control. Mom called one evening while I was making pasta. Not because she needed something. Not because Emily was struggling. Not because she wanted to talk about something important. She just asked how work was going. I told her about a new project. She listened. She didn't redirect the conversation. When she said, "I won't keep you," and hung up, I stood there for a second, fork in hand, stunned by how normal it felt. Trust didn't come rushing back. My therapist was clear about that. You don't rebuild trust by pretending nothing happened, she said. You rebuild it by watching behavior over time. And that's what I did. I watched. Mom kept going to therapy. Emily kept working and saving. Nathan stayed firm in his major choice. Dad kept showing up consistently, not with apologies anymore, but with presence. The family didn't become perfect. We became predictable in the best way. No ambushes, no secret agendas, no power plays disguised as concern. I still had the recordings, encrypted, backed up, locked away. Not as a threat, not as leverage, but as proof to myself that what I experienced was real, that I hadn't imagined the manipulation or exaggerated the harm. My therapist encouraged me to keep them, not to relive the pain, but to honor the clarity they gave me. Receipts aren't about revenge, she said. They're about memory. One night, Emily asked me if I regretted recording Mom, if I wished I'd handled it differently. No, I said without hesitation, because if I hadn't, nothing would have changed. We'd all still be pretending. She nodded slowly. I think you saved us, she said, even if Mom hates that. She doesn't hate it, I replied. She hates that she couldn't control it. The apartment that started everything still feels like mine in a way it never fully did before. Not because it's quieter, but because it's respected. No one treats it like communal property. No one jokes about how someone else could use it better. It's just my home. Family gatherings are smaller now, more intentional. Conversations are careful but honest. Love is there, but it's no longer weaponized. No one owes anyone access anymore. It's earned. I know some people think I went too far, that recording your own mother is extreme, that threatening exposure is cruel. Maybe it is, in a vacuum. But context matters. When manipulation is the language someone understands, clarity has to be louder. What I learned is this. Boundaries don't destroy families. Avoidance does. Silence does. Letting harm continue because confronting it feels uncomfortable does. When I pressed record, I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. I was trying to survive with my sense of self intact. And somehow, in doing that, I gave my family the chance to become something healthier than it ever was. We aren't the family Mom once tried to control. We're the family we chose to become. And for the first time in my life, that choice feels real.